Hello and welcome to Life with Francie podcast, a place where you will find all kinds of conversation like mental health, self-love, self-care, trauma, hobbies, and more. With this podcast, I want to create a place where we support one another in business and personal life. Hope you enjoy this episode. Now, let's get this show started. This conversation was thanks to Podmatch, an amazing community for podcast hosts and podcast guests to find each other to do collaborations like this one. And they have tools and resources for everybody in the podcasting community. But on today's episode, I have the pleasure to talk to Paul Zolman, who is the international best-selling author of The Role of Love. But the true love author of Love is God. In this book, you will find what helped him move from a childhood boot camp of abuse to being a person who loves everyone and can find good about anyone in any circumstances. I can't wait to know more about him. Now let's welcome Paul to the show. Tell us, what is life with you?
Hey, thank you, Francie. It's so nice to be with you today.
Good. Yeah, tell us more about you and this book and love. I love this.
It probably need to start with a little bit of background story. Everybody likes the backstory, Francie, and I'm just going to offer a little bit of that up front here, so you can kind of get the flavor of where I came from. And when you know where I came from, you'll see where I'm at now and say, "Wow, that's something I want to do in my life," or that might be something that might be a path that might work for me. And so that's the hope here is that maybe somebody can understand or have a takeaway today that they will improve their own life. I want to start with just a little story about my grandfather. The grandfather Zolman is his name, and he's lived in Indiana in the United States, and in Indiana had 9 children with his first wife. After that ninth child, suddenly his wife passed away. We don't know what the circumstances were, but she passed away, and he was very distraught about that. And so distraught, in fact, he decided, I'm going to sell the farm, I'm going to sell the equipment. Everything reminded him of her. And then when people came to pick up the equipment or when they came to the auction, he'd say, would you also like this child? Would you like this child? Would you like this child? And systematically gave all the children away except for one. So Benjamin was the one he took with him to Montana. This was late 1800s, so and the early 1900s. Took Benjamin with him to Montana, and in Montana found my grandmother, who was a school teacher at the time, had 10 more children with her, of which my father was number 6. So my father was born in 1922, and when he was 10 years old, that grandfather passed away. So here you have an abandonment issue of 19 children. My father's 10 years old, born in 1922. So 1932, you're right in the middle of the Great Depression in the United States and around the world. You've got economic issues. So my father really had to kind of stop going to school after 8th grade, graduated from 8th grade, and then just had to go to work. So after he starts to work, he learns a little bit about mechanics and then becomes a truck driver. And as a truck driver, he would be gone in the middle of the week, home on the weekends. And this is what I loved about my father. Every Friday, he would designate that a date night with my mother. They always had a date. Now, the venue was the problem, and maybe what they did there was a problem. It was always at the Maverick Bar. It was always over alcohol. And the problem with that was that as he's becoming more and more imbibed, and my mother's just kind of telling him, well, how was your week? How was your week? And they're having this exchange. I'm number 10 of 11 children. So it takes my mom a long time to talk about all the children.
Yeah.
And so when they get to the end, I'm close to the end. So by the end, he's just all really riled up and everything. And then it all comes down that, well, Paul did this, Paul did that. And it was we did not look forward to the weekends.
Mm.
It was either a belt or a spanking or both, or just, or some, occasionally there would be times that we could spend, if we had a good week, then he might take us also on Saturday during the day to the Maverick Bar, and we get to be there in that environment, and that was a date for us, for the kids.
Wow.
And so I learned how to play pool, and I learned how horrible contaminated 7 Up tasted, because
Mm.
they dipped that little plunger thing into the 7 Up or into alcohol beverages, and then it would just kind of just taste, this is off a little bit. And so that was my childhood. So I moved out when I was 17 and moved in with my brother. My brother was a very loving father. He had a few children at the time, but he's just very loving. But he still had these outbursts. We had this like residual anger from
Mm-hmm.
growing up in an environment like that, and both of us, and including all my other siblings, also had that residual anger. How do you get rid of that? So what I figured out is that what I was doing was I was being annoyed at somebody, something that they did, something totally out of my control, but I still got annoyed at it. Then I stacked another annoyance and another one, another one, another one until it flashed. And then it just had an anger outburst like that. I blamed my father for all this up until about age 35. And one thing, Francie, one thing about blame is that when you can blame someone, you don't have to change because it's their fault.
Yeah.
It's their fault, or it's the thing's fault, or it's whatever, whoever's fault it is. It's, if you can blame, you don't have to change. And there's no need to change because it wasn't you. But I felt at age 35, I'm responsible for my own actions. I'm responsible for my own life. And it was kind of late coming. I'm just kind of a late bloomer in that way. My father had already passed away 7 years earlier. So here he was, not even there to defend himself, and I'm blaming him for this and that. And it's just, I thought, that's got to stop. It's just got to stop, and it's got to stop with me. So I started working on that, started getting a little bit better, and then had some wake up calls that no, I'm not quite better yet. I'm not whole yet. One of the probably the biggest one was 15 years ago. I'd just gone through a divorce with my first wife. We had 8 children. So it's just kind of generational, that thing.
I
This,
see.
he passed it on. It's not genetic, it's just generational. It's something that they pass on. It's, you find something you like, you just keep doing it. And having kids we liked, I guess. So, or just the, yeah. Anyway, so 15 years ago, I've been divorced for about 3 or 4 years, and I started dating, or started getting to know my sister's neighbor. She was living 7 hours away from me, and prior to that, for about a year and a half, I've been doing what I call destination dating. So I was living in Charleston, South Carolina at the time, and I would go down to Daytona Beach or down to Jacksonville for a date. Then I go to Columbia, South Carolina, or I'd go to Charlotte, North Carolina, New York City, Nashville, Kansas City, uh, Phoenix, Snowflake, Arizona, Salt Lake City, Cabo San Lucas, just
Wow.
Las Vegas. All these places I went, destination dating. When you go out looking for love, you're looking for someone that might like you, or you might feel that they like you. And it's just kind of it's kind of a hunt of a kind, and it's hard. It's really hard. I found that didn't work very well. There was distance problems. There were this and that. It was just didn't work out. I didn't really find anybody. In fact, I thought I found somebody and moved to Phoenix, and that's where I was when my sister said, she thought I was lonely. She's an older sister. She thought I was lonely and thought I should meet her neighbor. So we started corresponding a little bit, and then it came to the point I actually moved. I told my sister I did not want to do the destination dating, but she said, as big sisters do, they say, "Oh, come on," and you just have to do what big sisters tell you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I started dating with her. It came time for Big Brother approval, and Big Brother is the one I moved in with when I was 17. Big Brother lived 300 miles north of where I was at, and he first thing that happened is I took this woman in. My sister-in-law pulls her aside and said, "The only emotion that the Zolman family learned growing up is anger." At first, I said, denied it. Then it made me mad. And I thought, sounds like she nailed it. And I thought, if there's any opportunity to change that perception of the Zolman family, now was that opportunity. So I started reading the color code and I started reading the love languages, and I kind of settled on the principles of the love languages. I liked it because it actually, Dr. Chapman explains it that they really are the things that Jesus did in his lifetime. He spent time with people. He'd offered encouraging words, and we've got his words. We love his words. He served people. He had gifts of the Spirit, and then he touched. So he touched people, and they were able to see, or touch their ears, and they were able to hear again. And he just did all those things, and so that resonated with me. I wanted to do something like that. But Dr. Chapman also suggested that, well, if I find out what your love language is, Francie, or if I guess what your love language is and cater to that, then we're going to be buddies. I'm a really bad guesser. I just can't, I'm not guessing.
A lot of people have trouble with that one. And what he's referring to is the five love languages of like words of affirmation, act of service, uh,
Quality,
ah,
quality time,
quality time, gifts, and
physical touch.
physical touch. There you go. Okay, now.
So those are the five love languages. So that application didn't work for me. And then the other application that Dr. Chapman has said that, well, if you take this survey, you can find out what your love language is. What am I supposed to do with that, Francie? Advertise? Hello, I'm Gifts. What do you have for me today? That's a little bit awkward. Most people
Yeah, it is.
repel people. You're supposed to be loving people and repel them and make them go away. That didn't work for me either. So I thought, you know what? I like the principles, but
Mhm.
the applications aren't working for me. I'm going to see if I can do something a little bit different. I liked games when I was a kid, so I thought, and I thought that as even though it was an abusive environment, when we played games, it was like dog eat dog, very competitive, and it was that kind of it was locker room talk for me, and for boys it was great, but maybe girls wouldn't appreciate it. But we all like games. And so I thought maybe I can make it a game. Maybe that would instill something in me. I can get to know those love languages. Even after reading the five love languages 4 or 5 times, if my life depended on it to spit out all five love languages like you did, Francie, if my life depended on it, I'd struggle just like you just did.
Yeah.
Spit them all out. So I thought maybe I can change that a little bit. So I contacted Dr. Chapman, asked him if he's licensing those little icons, the little pictures for each one of the love languages. And his attorney wrote me back and said, no, we're not doing that at this time. I actually felt relief. I went to a copyright attorney here locally, found out that theory is not copyrightable, but application is. They weren't doing it as a game, so I said, well, I can do this. I've made my own icons, and then I put it on a die. It's very simply looks like that.
Oh,
So
wow.
this is time. That's service. Those are the words. There's touch, and then the gifts right there.
I love that.
So 5 love languages, 6 sides on the die. So on the 6th side, I created an icon which means surprise me. So you're just looking for random acts of kindness to do on that day. Just 2 instructions, make it very simple. 2 instructions. You roll the die every day. That's the love language you practice giving away all day that day. All day.
What? That's pretty cool.
So it makes it very easy. It helps you on the direction. I had directional problems when I was reading the love languages, and maybe that's why I didn't get it that well. That and I came from a childhood of abuse. I came from that background, so really was hard for me to understand. Well, now am I giving it away, or is it coming my way? Am I supposed to expect it from people? And so I said, I don't have any control over people sending love my way. I have zero control. If I tell them, it almost seems like a duty to them. But there's nice ways that you can broadcast what you want. And I think that what I found is that as you're rolling the die and you're practicing that love language that day to people, everybody, not just significant others, that's a part-time job. You're doing it to everybody. While you're doing that, you're watching for people that light up.
Mm-hmm.
When they light up, you don't have to stop the relationship and say, could you take this survey so I know how to love you? They lit up. They like that. That's what you just take a mental note that's what they like, and then wash, rinse, repeat. Do it over and over again. And you just keep doing that. What you're trying to do, Francie, is to make people's day. You're trying
Mm-hmm.
to help them have a better day. And when you do that, they're going to go around to their circle of influence and help others have a better day. Look at the contrast. If I send anger out, guess what? That comes right back
Yep.
immediately. And it's I made your day bad. Now you're making my day bad, a little bit worse. And it's like that when you're a kid, maybe you did it, maybe you didn't. But in the lunch line, we'd be slugged in the shoulder and someone would say, pass it on. It's like a slug in the shoulder, pass it on. This is similar to that, but it's in a loving way that we want to send love out so that people will pass it on. It's almost like pay it forward,
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. And it's just develops a mindset. The mindset is what's right about that person, what can I love about that person, and it really helps you. You'll be so busy doing that, it'll help you avoid the mindset that would annoy you. Say, what's wrong with that person? Why are they doing that? And go down that critical path or a judgmental path, go even a little further to judgment of that person. It's not even in your wheelhouse. It shouldn't be in your wheelhouse. It's not your job. We're not the judges of each other. We're not the judges of people in that way. We are responsible for who we are. And so at the beginning of the day, it's almost like you're determining, I'm going to love, and I'm going to love in this way just by rolling the die. Takes 2 seconds. It's kind of like an investment that you want to put a little in and get a lot out of that investment. This is a legitimate, perfect investment like that. You roll the die for 2 seconds, you're going to get love coming back to you. And I put pictures on it for a reason. There are no words on the die.
Yeah.
That so it's all pictures because pictures kind of burn into your mind a little bit. They're kind of a memory hook. If I say the word elephant, ELEPHNT, doesn't come to mind, but the picture of the elephant comes to mind. You don't see the letters, you don't see anything like that. You see the picture. Pictures will stay with you throughout the day, so you remember what you rolled and you're watching for those opportunities all day long. It'll change your life. It'll change your day. It'll change the days of other people because you're lighting them up. You're helping them have a better day. You're looking at the good.
And
I,
even give you a different perspective on love, because yeah, once you know your love language, now you're like expecting it, like, okay, this is my love language and this is the only way that you're gonna love me. But if you practice with the other ones, then you start seeing love in different ways. When people come at you, like, oh shoot, that's the way that they love me, so it will be a lot easier to recognize, I love that, I'm here for it.
Oh, good friends. You really nailed it when you said that, and I like that. When after you've done this for 30 days, you will have learned to all five love languages, forward and backward, to give it away, so that you go rattle them off. You'll know all five love languages, different from Dr. Chapman's book. I couldn't get it. I couldn't rattle it off. you'll know them forward and backwards so that when it comes your way, like you said, Francie, you can respond appropriately. You say, well, that's not my primary love language, but I can see they're loving on me. I can send it back. And
Yeah.
I can respond appropriately to that. One thing that I found too is that, if you're focused on the faults and the weaknesses of another, you're annoyed with that, and you're magnifying that, and you're talking about that. Guess what's going to happen? That's a boomerang. It's coming right back your way. They're going to scrutinize you. They're going to look at your faults. They're going to look at your weaknesses. Who wants that? Why would we even do it? Why would we send that out? So I like to compare it to a magnifying glass. A magnifying glass just makes things bigger. So if you're going to magnify weaknesses, you want those weaknesses to grow in that other person. Why would you do that? Focus on the good of the other people. Focus on what's right about them. What can you love about them? And that's going to grow. And you're going to be happy. You're going to be paid, so to speak, when they light up. When you've made somebody's day, it's so gratifying. It really is something that you can take with you. Nobody can take that away from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I'm just listening to you, your story and everything, and I could relate so much to your story as well. My grandparents had 11 kids, and out of 11 kids, we had 24 cousins.
Wow.
So I'm an only child, but in my house or my aunts and uncles' house, there was always 5 to 10 kids at the same time. So it was like pure chaos, but it's like a lovely chaos. I
Oh,
miss that era, you know. And now I go back, and now only one cousin staying in the neighborhood has 3 kids, and now the 3 kids are the ones that rule the neighborhood. And
yeah.
it's just sad because like we grow up, you know, and we go away.
Yeah.
But there is still like 60 houses when I go back to Puerto Rico.
So the Zolman name was uncommon in the United States, and I think they must have recognized that. So they had to have a lot of kids to propagate the name, just send it out there. Want to just do one little analogy here. The other day I was out walking in my neighborhood, Francie, and
Mm-hmm.
my neighbor had found the stick. So on one side of the stick doesn't have any bark on it at all, but one side of the stick was very smooth, very easy to put your hand on it, kind of like a walking stick. And it's probably about 3.5 feet long, so it's perfect size for a walking stick. But you see the other side of the stick has like little knots on it, and so what I call this is my naughty and nice stick. And I'm sure Santa Claus has a stick just like that he measures naughty and nice people. So just think of this in this vernacular. Think that anger is going to be on the naughty side of the stick.
Mm-hmm.
With anger comes the humor, the cutting, biting humor, comes insults. It has its own language all by itself. It
Yep.
kind of has what I would call its own culture all by itself. And if you figure that culture is your personality and you don't want to change because people wouldn't know you anymore, that's pretty scary. But that's where I was. My sister-in-law was the one that identified that I really kind of was on the angry side of the stick, not the
Mm-hmm.
nice side of the stick. And so as I thought about that, I thought, well, what would be the opposite of that? And then it came to love. If you to have been on the loving side of the stick, you have the love languages. It's a whole different language. It's a whole different culture. It's different humor. It's different. It's just sending out kindnesses. And so I needed to move myself from where I was to that other side of the stick. And
Yeah.
as I rolled the die, you and as I've mentioned, I became focused on what's right about people, what can I love about them, and I never came to a point. I overcame that any opportunity to be annoyed with anyone. So right now, if they do something funny, I said, "Oh, you're doing that," and then it's over. I'm not annoyed with them because it was their choice to make. It's not like I'm trying to manage their life anymore like I was before. If you're annoyed, you're saying, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. Or, I mean, you're just trying to get involved there of a choice that they may have made. And you could be annoyed in doing that and get to the point of being angry about that. Don't even go there. You don't have to go there. Somebody's driving their car and they cut you off. You can't go there. You just can't go there. You just say, well, I'll just allow them some space. They're probably in a little bit more hurry than I am, or they need to get, or maybe they're having an emergency. Think the good thoughts and just stay in your lane. Stay where you want to be in that love lane to start keep loving people and sending it out all day long.
Yeah, and I love it because it's all by choice. I'm learning it on my own. I spent a decade super angry, and it wasn't till I got the a mental health evaluation where he showed me where the average person is. Then if you like really angry, that's where you should be. But I had like a whole category of anger by myself, and I was like, well, nobody should be fancy angry. And then with that comes bipolar. So like now that I'm self-aware, that is another level of anger. It's more of like, yeah, people cut you off. Hey, hope you have a great day. That's not the right speed. So you might slow down because something bad might happen. So I hope to God that nothing happens to you and your day can change, like things like that, because I can't. Now, if I'm tired, and it's that too, like what is going on behind the scenes, to be able to choose a better emotion because it's all an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And just how you go into anger, you can choose to come out somewhere else, but it takes a lot of work. And then with time, it comes easily, little by little. But I love how you talk about the emotions too.
So I look at this as a tool. I mean, it absolutely is a tool. That the residual anger I had, I couldn't get rid of it. Even if I declared I want to get rid of this, that what do I do? You have to have kind of a replacement behavior. And
Mm-hmm.
so the replacement behavior for me became rolling the die and then focusing on watching for those opportunities. If you to even emphasize it just a little bit more, I created a journal. So on the journal
Oh,
page,
nice. Yes. Oh, I love that. I love journals.
so on the journal page, it has what you rolled, what opportunities you saw to love in that way that day, then what you did about those opportunities.
Oh,
So no longer is it a blank page in the journal that you have a blank mind that you can't think of what you want to write in the journal. This is a purposeful, intentional journal of love. You're going to pass this on for generations to your children or grandchildren. I absolutely would have loved to have a journal like that from my mother, but
hmm.
or my grandmother or my grandfather. Instead, I got a journal of what the weather was like 60 years ago. Who cares about the weather? I could have read an almanac to get that. Who
Yeah.
cares about that? So I would have loved to have just how did they feel? What was there to love in their day? And what did they do about that? How did they express love? And did they serve? Did they give compliments? What were they known for? I mean, how did they want to be remembered? Is the thing, and it comes back right back to us. How do we want to be remembered? And when I realized that I was on the angry end of the stick, I didn't want to be remembered like that. I did not want to continue to have that stereotype of what the Zolman family grew up like. Did not want to take that with me. Did not want to continue to have that in my life or my other life of my children. So I specifically decided to make that change. And so that's what the journal was helpful in that way. I wrote a book all about these experiences, then several experiences of testing the die first. The book I just published this year, but I've had the die since about 2017. One time
Okay.
I one time I had a family of five children test the die, and the 4 year old, it was a little boy, and he rolled the die, and he rolled physical touch, and he jumps up and down, pumps his fist, and say, "Yes, physical touch," and immediately began beating up on his brothers. He thought that was love, because that's probably what they did to him.
Yeah.
So the mother had to suppress the laughter because it was kind of funny that
Yeah.
she had to suppress that laughter and say, "No, son, this is appropriate physical touch," and it became a teaching moment. And I think
Hmm.
that even if you're 4 years old or if you're 3 years old, that's how you're when you're reading a book to a 2 year old or a 3 year old or a 4 year old. They're all there are is looking at the pictures. They can look at the die and they can understand what it is that each one of those symbols on the die means, and they can start learning appropriate loving ways when they're that young, and be responsible for it. Think of this in a school system. Excuse me, and I'm thinking maybe K through 6, because after 6th grade, then they're separating for classes, and they're going to different classes. They're not going to end up in that same class, but they roll the die, take the 2 seconds or the minute that it takes to roll the die and to explain what the class is doing that day. Take that minute at the beginning of the day. Have the children watch for those opportunities all day long. At the end of the day, provide them a journal page. Now they have to report what they did about what they rolled earlier in the day. This, if they're conscious and aware of what they're they have how they have to act for the day, I think that it's going to tamp down a lot of misbehaving, because they're going to say, well, that's not nice physical touch, or that's not those aren't kind words, and they'll understand what it is, and they'll come to that point that you'll have this loving classroom, and they'll be able to learn that. Second thing that you'll have is that at the end of the year, you're going to have all these pages from that first grader or that third grader or that fourth grader that becomes a journal for them, a love journal. I mean, you probably would have loved to have a love journal from your first grade or your second grade or your third grade or any grade of those grades, just to understand what did you love at that time, and what did you do about that love that you had in your heart on that day. It's a great legacy to pass on to children or grandchildren. Like I said, I would have loved to have something like that from my mother, and just understand what was it that she loved in her time, her day and age, and what did she do about that.
Wow. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And you touch book, journal. I mean, you're speaking my language, emotions. You're bringing it all in. So, how did the book came about after, having the dice for so long?
Well, it's interesting how the book came about. I was trying to market the die to mental health professionals, and I went to visit with one in March of last year, and he said, "I really like this, but you really kind of need to have a book to go with it, because no, it took me it would take me you know 10 minutes, 5 minutes to explain to him how the die worked, because it's so brand new. Any
Hmm.
new product like that has to be explained a little bit. And so he said, I don't have that kind of time to explain things, but if you had a book that explained it, we needed a kind of an update from Dr. Chapman's book. And I love what you're doing. He said, write a book, and I'll write a little piece in the forward. So actually in the forward of the book is a little blurb about that mental health counselor that actually inspired me to do it. So that's how that came about, is that I just started collecting the different stories that I had already collected over the years and put it all together. Once I organized it, it only took me 6 weeks to write the book, took longer to edit the book, longer to design the cover of the book, and longer to actually put it together for printing than it did to write the book. And then I also put together an audible of the book. So if people like listening to podcasts like this, they can listen to the audible as well. The Audible is only available on Amazon, but you don't want to type in "Roll of Love" on Amazon because you're going to get love this, love that, love a million different things, and it's going to be a needle in the haystack. But if you type in my name and type in Paul Zolman, you'll get right to it, and it'll come right up for you.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you would like my listeners to know about you?
Well, they can go to the website and they can actually buy the package. So Amazon doesn't allow dice and the books to be together because they're different. The books are printed in a printing press and it's a
Hmm.
different facility almost then, so they don't have the combinations. But if you go to my website, it's called it's rolloflove.com, ROLE of love.com. Just remember that you ROLL, you roll the dice outside of you, change happens within you. So that's what we're looking for. ROLE is change within, rolloflove.com.
I love that. I'll make sure I have the your links in the show notes.
Great. Thank, thank you so much, Francie. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Oh, the feeling is mutual. So, thank you so much for listening to another episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Remember, you can find my podcast in all major platforms as well as my YouTube channel. Like and subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app and the reviews so other people will can find the show. I hope you have a blessed day.